Welcome to any folks in the classroom yet. You should, by clicking on the 3-day challenge, Plotting Your Romance, you're in the classroom, and we'll be starting in just a minute. Okay, wonderful. I don't even have to tell you to go ahead and say hello in the chat bar at the right. That lets me know that this is where you would post questions during the course of our lecture today. I'm waiting for a couple more folks to get in. Linda, I appreciate your kind comments on my craft books. Thank you very much. Looks like we're going to have a very exciting and full classroom. Now, what we'll be doing here is we'll be talking predominantly about plotting a romance. However, I will continue to give examples, etc., from non-romance. So if you have a strong romantic element. I'll get started here in just a moment. If you have to leave, I understand perfectly. Go ahead, and that's what the replay is about. So there will be a replay on the Facebook group just a little bit after we're done with the live event. All right, we're at the top of the hour. But because it can take people just a few minutes, I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes before we jump in. Now, some of you have asked specifically or talked about different aspects of writing with romance or with non-romance. But some of it is too deep a dive for what we're going to be able to do here on our 3 days together. But there will be more challenges coming up, and there will be more 4 to 5 week courses also coming up that might be able to get you a little bit more than what you want. So lots of familiar faces, a lot of new faces. This is for brand new writers. This is for multi-published writers. So I think we'll go ahead and get started here. First thing we have to be thinking about when we're looking at plotting a romance is story structure. That's another way of saying plotting. Plotting has gotten a bad name, like it is something that is restrictive, that is meant to be repetitive to the point that all your stories sound the same. And that's not the case at all. So we're looking at story structure here. Beth Ann, if you cannot hear anything, anybody else having that problem with not hearing should be able, do you have something else going on in the background? Or have you turned off your volume, muted your volume? I do that all the time. Then we're going to look at story structure. What we're going to be looking at is think in commercial fiction. Commercial fiction is mysteries, romances, fantasy, sci-fi, everything except almost literary fiction. In commercial fiction, what you're looking at is your character starts at a point of the story, that's one on this mountain, and they start off on a journey, a story journey. And in this journey, we call it climbing this mountain, but what it is it's increasing risk, and they have to find and face something that they've been avoiding up until this point. So this is where your character starts, and then you go on this journey until they at the top of the mountain, which is in romance, it's called Black Moment, but in other genres, it can be called climax, and it is change occurs as a result of facing what they feared to face. When you are writing a romance, it is going to be about facing a fear associated with love. Now, it could be commitment, it could be abandonment, it could be losing someone again, whatever it is. But if you're writing a romance, that's what it is about. Okay. Joy, who is here at 2 a.m. in the morning, she gets the Writer of the Day award for being willing to commit to her writing at that point. Follow Joy. She is somebody who's going to make it in a career because she's not letting time be a factor for not getting to hear and learn some more. So this is the image of the mountain. But when you're looking at your product, your book, whether it's a novella or whether it's a 110,000 word manuscript, what you're looking at is where do these points occur in your manuscript. So this is using a 60,000 word manuscript so that you can see 60,000 words. That's where the black moment and the ending of the story is. The black moment will start before that point, but it's going to end by 60,000 or thereabouts. So the middle of the story, which is going to be tomorrow's lecture, is occurring roughly about the 30,000 word count. And that means within 5,000 on either side of that. And the story starts at the 0 word count. Now, the reason we look at this is that what happens for writers is sometimes they don't put enough information in the front that is needed to get them to the end. And sometimes it is, you get deeper into the story and it just peters out. It just goes flat. And that is because you're not focusing enough on the beginning of the story, what has to be there. Because we're keeping this as a tight lectures, we're going to be focusing on the beginning of the story, the midpoint of the story, the end of the story. Now, if you're writing a longer story, usually anything that has a strong external storyline, like romantic suspense or urban fantasy with a romance in it, you're looking at different word counts. If you don't know what your word count is, you can do a Google search and literally say, what is the average length of this kind of book? Because you don't want to jump in too quickly with stuff that happens in the middle of the story. You want to make sure that you have shown your character at the beginning of the story in a way that the reader is following along with them. Things are going to change in that middle of the story. That's why we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. And at that black moment, end of the story, we're going to be looking at things that are, by the time it gets there, we should be okay with it. So whatever word count that you are. If you're working on a novella, for example, you have 25,000 words. The middle of the story is about 12,500. And those are approximation. You can look at any book on any romance, any mystery, etc., on your bookshelf, and you're going to find what we're going to be talking about tomorrow going on in the middle of the story. Things change there. It's a plot point, and it's important to know that. This is the difference between being a pantser and being someone who understands story structure, because a pantser starts in writing wherever they are excited about writing the story, and then they get going. And that's why pantsters can end up, instead of an 80,000 words, they end up with 120,000. So then they have to throw away everything to get back to the word count that a publisher or that a reader is used to reading. So we're going to be talking about the difference between romance versus strong romantic elements. Romance is, the focus is on the romance. It sounds really silly, but it's not, because it can be really, really easy as a writer to get running off on the external storyline. So if it has a mystery element to it, you might end up writing about the mystery more than the romance. So in a romance, you're looking at, start with the romance, make sure you got a handle on your two main characters, which are the hero and heroine, or the hero and hero, or heroine and heroine, or Kelpie and werewolf, whatever it is, focus in on them. So as you go deeper into the story, when we look at the middle of the story, what's going to happen to them, it's going to change the romance there. If you have romantic elements, such as a mystery or a suspense or a thriller, you start with that aspect of your story. And the romance adds complications to that. So when we hit the major plot points in your story, in this case, in the 3 days with beginning, middle, and end, you would lead with the mystery and then show how the romance is impacted by it. But it's just the opposite if you're writing a romance. And I've known a lot of people that think that they're writing a romance because it's very clear that there is a romantic element to it. But what happens is, if you look at that beginning, the middle, and the end, you will see that it is more about that mystery or the external plot line. I can't. There's a question here that says, my agent always wants me to write long, about 120,000 words, because it's easier for her to tell me what to leave out than what to put in. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. It's just that you will not be able to change agents, because other agents and editors don't want that. You're trying to give them something that's as close to what they think that they can sell as possible. So it's just something that to keep in mind. All right. So here we're going to talk about character-driven plotting and why it matters. Basically, when you're talking about character-driven plotting, it's about the main characters. You take those same characters and put them in a different story and situation. You are not going to, you'll have a totally different story. So it should be that. It's not interchangeable and easy. So when we're talking romance, it's about this couple and what this, I'll call them a hero and heroine. This heroine is afraid of X. That's what she has to face. And the hero might be afraid of Y, something totally different. They both have to overcome those to fall in love, to accept that they can have love. So these are not interchangeable people. In a romance, you know that there's a happy ever after at the end, meaning the couple gets together and make a commitment to one another, or a happy for now. If they don't, it's probably strong romantic elements, but there are exceptions, particularly when you're reading indie published books. So there's some leeway there. But if you're trying to submit or get picked up by a traditional publisher, such as a Harlequin or any of the publishers that are publishing in romance, if you call it a romance, it's got to look like a romance to them. And they are character-driven stories. Now, if you are writing in a genre such as male action adventure, oftentimes you can take those characters and switch them around. But because it's more about the go after the bad guy, beat the bad guy down, face some obstacles against the bad guy, but then you come out ahead. So those are nuances for that particular subgenre. So in talking about romance, we're talking about how do you reveal your character and why it matters. The opening of the story, which I call the everyday world, you can call it ordinary world, but basically where the story opens. It maximizes the use of comparison in a romance. That means if someone is afraid to commit to a new relationship, the beginning of the story, they may not want to go on that blind date because they know they're not wanting to get involved. They know that they've been hurt in the past and they don't want to face it again. So at the end of the story, you show that this character has released that fear and is open to accepting love or commitment, or that they, even if they're going to be abandoned, they can live with it until then, So life has no guarantees to it, but you have to show that your character has changed. And you do that in a romance by showing how and who they are at the beginning of the story versus how and who they are at the end of the story. So in other genres, mystery, etc., they may be afraid of butting their nose in on finding out what happened to their friend who died. But by the end of the story, it is because they were willing to face that fear of getting involved in something they don't know about that allows the officials to find the bad person. So at the beginning of the story, in a romance, what you're going to do is you show your character in a situation where this is their normal reaction to love or committing or whatever it is that your character is afraid of. You show how they're avoiding it. Then you give them a choice. Now, this choice is something that they may not know exactly how far this choice is going to lead. But you give them a choice, such as that blind date. Okay, just try this one blind date. And if things don't work out, I won't get on your case anymore. It's that choice. Then the reader gets to know what that choice is, because that choice can have the main character hesitating or dragging their feet or not wanting to do whatever it is, because they have a hint, as the reader does, that it might get them in deeper than they want to go. So figure out what that choice is. And this choice in the beginning is often called the inciting incident. Something happens. They're given this chance. And that's going to, at the beginning of the story, is the only time that you as the author get to throw something at the writer, at the character. From that point on, as we get into tomorrow's lecture, you'll see that you're going through the same process, but it's based on the choices that your character has taken earlier. And that's going to bring them eventually to their facing their fear. So that choice must lead to an action that forces the character into closer proximity to the love interest. They may, let me give you some, I'll give you some examples here in a minute. If you are not writing a romance, that choice leads them closer into proximity of what they've been trying to avoid in law enforcement or in not wanting to take a new job where they're, or go to a different city to live, or whatever it is that they've been dragging their feet at. Because the choice will then lead to a decision. And that decision is what creates the action. Choice, decision, action drives your story. The reader knows when we hear, okay, here's the choice. She's going to take the date or not going to take the date. We know what the choice is. The decision is, rats, I'll just do it this time and that'll be the end of it. That creates the action that they take. This way, the reader is following along. Now, it's literally that decision point could be having their parents having input to them, the best friend having input to them, the ex, so it can go long or short. But it leads to an action. Once that action is taken, once they go on that blind date, what happens is the reader knows exactly what can go wrong if you've made it clear about what that choice is. The decision is now that you've given them enough reason to take this action and they move forward. But if you just jump from choice to action, you're rushing your reader. If you don't have a choice or a decision and just force your character to do something because you as the author do it, that's called episodic writing. It can happen in literary novels, but not in romances and commercial fiction novels. So let's look at some examples. She receives a letter. That could be the first choice that she has. What is she going to do about what the letter is requesting? He's given an assignment or a mission that is going to involve her, or that it's going to take her away from him, or take him away from her, and that is going to cause challenges to both of them. She takes a new job, which puts her working more closely with him. Now, if it's somebody she doesn't want to work with, right there, you can start seeing where this is going to add complication. He accepts a dare, whatever the issue is. This is your inciting incident, is what is that choice? So let me bring it out. So she's been given a job offer that will help her, whatever it is. Stay on the farm, get to the city, get the health insurance that she doesn't have right now, whatever it is. But it means working closely with him. And that's the choice. You make that very clear to the reader that this is not going to be an easy choice to take. If she doesn't take this job, it might take weeks, if not months, before she finds a job is good. And she can't wait. This is part of her decision-making process. If I do it, there's good things, but there's bad things. But if I don't do it, there's bad things and good things. You've got to make these kind of weigh equally. So she takes the job after being reassured that she doesn't have to report directly to him. But when she shows up on the first day, she discovers he requested to work with her. So now she can stay or leave. So it's like revisiting that earlier choice. The reader understands perfectly why this is not a good idea And so you can feel for this character in that situation because we understood. The writer has given us enough information that we understand. So her final decision is to stay and grits her teeth. And there your story takes off from that point. So what's important at the beginning of your story is who is your heroine or hero, your main character, if you're not writing a romance. But there's two people involved in the romance. It isn't just, here's the handsome or beautiful, wealthy, everything's fine, they're coming to solve all my problems. That's not what a romance is about. A romance is overcoming one's fears, one's built-in expectations of how romance could go bad. If they've had a previous relationship and it's gone bad, that's going to build in. But the reader needs to understand that. That's part of what's holding them back. Look at which of the two main characters in your story changes the most. So even, here's an example. J.D. Robb, who also writes as Nora Roberts, has written a series under the name J.D. Robb, and her first books in the series, you would call it urban fantasy. It's futuristic, and she is the one that changes most in the first story because she gets involved with the man. Yes, he's handsome. Yes, he's wealthy. But she doesn't trust him because he's a potential suspect in the mystery that she's trying to solve. She works in law enforcement. So at the end of that story, you have a happy for now. She knows he's not the bad guy she thought he was, but she has a whole background of why she's not going to trust love. And it takes a while for them to get together as a couple. So which one changes the most? If you know over a course of the series that both change, that's great. But in one book that you're looking at or thinking about right now, think about who changes the most. Then look at what they are lacking, even if they are not aware of it. In a romance, it's lacking in regards to what they expect from a relationship. So it's about what love means to them. If you are not writing a romance, your hero or heroine could be lacking something else, your main character, lacking a sense of that they're in the right career or that they are capable of handling an offer of something they don't believe that they belong where they are. And that's a very common fear for people, is that imposter syndrome. So whatever it is, put your finger on, go deep enough in the beginning of your story, and that's going to make it easier to go deeper into your story. And again, they may not be aware of it, but you, the author, should be. And for that romance, the hint is the lack is what's keeping them from love. Another way to phrase that is, what do they fear will happen if they fall in love? If you are writing not a romance, but romantic elements, that fear can also be about getting involved with someone in a different social status, or someone in a different race or a different background or a different, whatever the issue is. What does your character fear will happen if they, and then you fill in the rest of that. Without understanding your heroine and hero, your story can easily peter out. As you get deeper into the story, or you, the author, are forced to start throwing stuff at them so that they can react to as your story progresses. And trust me, editors, agents, and anybody who's written for a while can start seeing that easily on the page. It's like they're dealing with the same issue, but it's just thrust upon them. It is not giving that character, it is not based on what the character's earlier choices were. So, homework 1. Pick one of your characters and label them heroine or hero, or if you want, main character. Ask them what's keeping them from wanting or accepting love. Another way of framing them is ask what they fear about love. This, I'm going to send this as an email to everyone in the group if I have your email address. So if you signed up to be part of this, not just getting the classroom or in the group, I will send you those emails. If we don't have your emails, just send me an email and say that you're in this group, because otherwise you won't get the homework sent to you directly. Also, in the Facebook group, the very top page of the home page, you're going to see some tabs. One is going to be called files. Every day, the homework that's been posted for that day is going to be posted up there in the file, so you can find it there too. Now, you can post your answer to the Facebook group. And by doing that, if you use a hashtag, look at the top, we're in the red, hashtag HW1, it used to be that all that homework would kind of join together, and I wouldn't get people's homework 1 done first before I go into deeper ones. But Facebook has changed their algorithms again. But still, it lets me know what assignment you're responding to. Okay. Going to give you some example here. Helen says, can we watch a replay of the videos? Absolutely. There's always a replay. It's either on the front page of the page, but it's also in the video on the tab at the end. Here's an example. My hero avoids love because he wants to avoid the pain of betrayal. This goes to his backstory. Betrayal is what he fears will happen again if he falls in love. So he's answering both questions there. Here's a different example. My heroine doesn't want to care for the hero because he could be the man behind a series of thefts she's trying to identify. Now, this is a problem if she is in law enforcement or some other situation that she's looking, her external story goal is who's behind the thefts and stop the thefts. But her internal fear is if this guy is involved, she fears that if she acts on her attraction, it'll compromise her objectivity in solving the crimes. Jacqueline says, can it be possible for both the hero and the heroine to have a similar fear? It can. Particularly if you're working on a small project, so 25,000 words, maybe 60,000 words, that's true. But they're coming at where they get that fear from 2 different directions. So you have a world of fears available to you. Changing the email, to have these 2 people have the exact same fear of commitment because my parent abandoned me, and both of them have that issue. In some ways, that can make it almost too easy for them to recognize it in the other. So it's always your choice on what you want to do. If you're writing shorter, that makes it very easy that they both could understand it. But if you're writing longer, you probably want something that's different between the 2 of them, because in real life, a lot of people fear love, but what they fear about it are for different reasons. Okay, I have Helen says the second example seems like more of an external fear rather than an internal one. It is if this person is committed to their occupation that can put them at odds. So it can be used as a reason for in the first story in a series, but not necessarily in every story. Let's see, we have it. There's a question in here that I wanted to get to, but I don't have the name of the person on it. That you want to get the emails, and I'll make sure that Tech Guy goes through and gets your email. So don't worry about that. Leslie asked, can you give an example of two different fears that can result in the two working out? He fears accepting love because his parents told him from a young child on that if the career that he wants, he's not going to be loved. No one is going to love him in having that kind of career. That can happen. Wants to be a musician or a writer or something else. They could have gotten that message that they're not really going to get love. Whereas the other character can fear love because they were hurt badly in the past and don't want to take that risk again because they're still kind of clawing out of the grief. So both of those are different fears. One might take more to change than the other, but they each have their own issues to deal with. Does that help, Leslie, a little bit? There's also going to be a bonus assignment. And this bonus assignment, you post these to the Facebook group. Identify what type or subgenre of romance you're writing. Several of you have already done it, and that's great. And this is the part that matters, though. What is the target word count expected for that type of story? Now, if you say, I have no idea, you can guess just to understand the concepts. But if you were talking to an editor or an agent and just threw something at them with a word count, like a mystery, they expected a 65,000 word mystery. You gave them a 40,000 word mystery. What are they going to do? They're going to send it back because you're not committed enough as a professional in your career as a writer to even find out. And you can do that easily just by doing a Google search. So just for the sake of this class, you can use a word count, knowing that you're going to change it when you get clearer about what you're writing. So if a word count goes between 65,000 and 95,000, just pick a number in between and then calculate where's the midpoint of your story, which is what we're going to talk about next lecture. The point is this gets you writing and thinking like a writer. So here's an example. You're writing a romance, and the subgenre is a contemporary category romance. That means at this time, I believe Harlequin is the only one writing category books. But they give you on the website for Harlequin books the word count. If you're looking for just a Harlequin Presents, one of their, you're looking at 50,000 words. But if you're looking at Harlequin Heartwarming, it's a 70 to 75,000 word book. So this is your opportunity to figure out if you're writing a fantasy with strong romantic elements, fantasies tend to be larger books. An urban fantasy or a magical realism, usually about 80 to 95,000 words, because you have a lot of world building to do. Often with historicals, you can have larger books too because of that world building, so the reader understands the context, the time frame of what's going on there. All right, so questions. So this is where I open it up, and you have questions. I'm here to give answers. Everybody gets quiet. And what you're going to do is you're going to start a new posting to the Facebook group. Don't put it on the back. Let's say Leslie posted something and she said, "Hi, Mary, I'm writing XXX." And somebody else then adds something to hers. I'm not going to see that posting because there's only one of me looking at the answers. I want to make it as easier as possible. Okay, Anna asks, if one character is changing more than the other, does this mean you give them more space? Yes. In the story. That's why having two people change evenly in the story is more problematic, because the reader is going to be tracking and see, let's have Anna is the protagonist in the story, and Anna has to overcome this big issue. And then Stephen is a protagonist in the story, and he has a big issue. That means the reader is trying to track in a big way both of them. So you need more word count. And the whole function here is to get you to start thinking of your character as more dimensional. We don't care what their hair color's like. We don't care how many tats they have. We care about what they're afraid of, what scares them, and are they going to face it? All right, so let me see if Anna asked something else. Okay. What was the hashtag for the bonus homework? Diane, on the good news is on the page that is written for the homework, it's going to have actually that information, but it is hashtag HWB for bonus. Beth Ann says, what is a good exercise for really drilling down to what your main character fears if they fall in love? Ask them. Literally, you've got to get deep enough into them, their background. Why are they being the person that's the belle of the ball, or is the joking, etc.? What are they hiding from? So literally just sit down with them and say, what are you afraid is going to happen if you fall in love? Are you afraid of hurting someone else? Are you afraid of, ask them some questions and you will get those answers. This is going to keep you from writing on the surface of them. They don't like each other because they overheard a conversation and misunderstood it. That's not fear. That's misunderstanding. Does that help a little bit, Beth Ann? Ziona, I'm working on book 3. This main character was introduced as an antagonist in book 2. I'm struggling to figure out how much backstory to include. I'll tell readers it's strongly urged to read series in order. But I do think I need to include some backstory. The point is, readers are going to pick up your books out of sequence all the time. So telling somebody, here's this book that they have spent money on, and then they should read that other book instead before they understand this book, is think of how you would feel if you picked up the third book in a mystery and it said, if you want to know what's going on with these, you got to go back and read these other 2 books. But it is not It's going to still be backstory. So you're going to reveal that part of backstory. If it's stuff that's shown up in a previous book, you may not have to spend so much page space on it, but there are going to be opportunities. Our romances, let's see. Helen, are romances usually written from a single point of view? No. At one time, they used to be. It was usually the female's point of view, but no, that doesn't limit unless you're going to a particular publisher and they want that, but you'll see it on their requirements. Beth Ann says, even for fictional characters, asking through the levels of why is useful. That gets the backstory. That why are you afraid often can lead to options for the backstory. But most fears of this type in particular, emotional fears, start when a person is a child or when they have gone through a traumatic situation. So you have a child, they may not even be aware how afraid they are. Asking them why can find out why they're afraid, what created the situation. But because we have a tendency to layer our hurts over and over and over again, they may not even be, they think that they dealt with the issue a long time ago, or they thought that they were going to it was a whole different issue. But by the author knowing what the issue is that they're going to have to face is invaluable. Diana says, I find making a character chart helps reveal the fears and the history of the characters. And that's why backstory counts. But most backstory, as writers, we have a tendency to start our novels with the backstory because we need to understand, particularly if we're pansters, what happened to this person. But most readers don't need that right up front. So they don't need it. They can get a hint of it. At that point, it's part of what's revealed in that decisions that they're going to make, their choices, why this is hard for someone and that is not hard for someone. So the emotional words thesaurus is a good source to define fears. That's very helpful. I can't, on my computer, I can't see a lot of people's first names, so I apologize. I'll just read what's saying what I'm responding to. Romances frequently give both heroine and the hero point of view, and sometimes of others. Yes, so you're responding to Helen's earlier question. All right, so so that was Kelly, thank you. Elaine recommends the emotional words thesaurus. And so Robert needs to leave. Not a problem. You can we're just going over the question and answers, and that will be on the replay. Don't start with backstory. Yay, Beth understands that. Again, the more you write, the more you understand this, because that's basically like going on a date and someone tells you everything that happened in all their other previous relationships. And what is your response to that? It's like, not interested, because you don't know them yet. Another person, Hope, do romance tropes matter when identifying the romance type or subgenre? No. Hope is asking about tropes, which are like second chance at love. Somewhere I have a whole big list of them. Those just, they help the the reader, like Romeo and Juliet is a trope because we understand they're not supposed to fall in love with each other. But for one of those characters, it could be Juliet is afraid to fall in love with Romeo because it's not only disappointing her family, they will cut her off and disinherit and disown her. For Romeo, he may not want to fall in love with her because the person he's supposed to marry in his society is a very wealthy person. And if he gets involved with Juliet, there goes an expectation of his future. He may not be ready to do that. So no, it's not, has nothing to do with the subgenre or the romance type. That's something to help you. And the reason tropes help is because it helps the author understand what is the conflict between these two people. Because if you don't have a big external story conflict like you do in a suspense or romantic elements, or that this character wants to travel the world and that character wants to settle down here and now, that is basically, that last one is a trope. So marriage of convenience, enemies to lovers, it helps the writer get, what the conflict is, and then that way you can, how do you explain that for this particular couple? So normally tropes can have shown up more in category romances, but you can have them in larger romances at times. Okay, any question? Any more questions? Again, if you have a question, as you get into the homework or whatever, a hashtag Q can be very, very helpful because I can find those questions easiest. And I try to get to questions first because particularly if the question is in general. So like the question that, let's see, that Hope asked is a question that everybody might need to know. Dory, what about short stories? There are short stories for romances, and you just look at the word count that you have available, and you often can use one of the tropes for that short story. Instead of using 50,000 or 80,000, you're only using 20, 25,000 words. And so that's very important. You're not going to have the word count. So each time you hit the major points in your story, beginning, middle, and end, as we're discussing today, or some of the other points, you are going to keep it focused. But same structure applies. Beth Ann asks, what day of the week will the longer workshops of the class that's coming up about writing romance, plotting the romance, occur? We're going to be doing those on Saturdays again. Probably, I don't know the time yet. Part of the time involves tech guy, and he has a full-time job. So I'm trying to work things around his schedule. And so that, Lord knows, if I get on here and try to push the wrong button, I blow everything up. So those lectures will be on Saturdays, have proved to be the easiest for most people to make. But again, there's always replays on those too. So I hope that helps a little bit. So Dory, did I give you your answer that you needed? Or were you thinking about something else? Louise is asking about, is tech guy recovering from shingles? I think it was around March of last year, Tech Guy came down with shingles and they got into one eye and they blinded him. So he is still working with it, but he can now see, which is good. But it's something that doesn't go away easily in particular aspects of it. Okay, we have another question here from Hope. When will the replay be available? Usually within about a half an hour to an hour after the live one. So my internet went down, so I may have missed your answer to this question. No, it's going to be up there online. It will be posted to the Facebook group. Look in the tabs at the beginning, at the top of the page, look under videos there. And sometimes it can, yeah, because we're not doing Facebook's version, we're doing live stream version. So thank you, Louise. I will tell him that you sent your best wishes to him. Tech Guy also does all the graphics and that type of stuff. So having him blinded for months on end was quite problematic around here. I've only told him, and I'm going to search for a replacement. And he started getting better at that point. No, not really. So any other questions that you might have here? And homework will be posted in those files and also be sent out to everybody that we have an email for. All right. Diane says, thanks. Always appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge. I wish there was a way to just share all of it instead of this lets you know, is this what you think you're needing in your writing? Because we do have that 4-week class. The third day, I'll give you some information on that. But, and there'll be a class upcoming about writing sexual tension. And some of you have mentioned it on the Facebook group because it sounds like you might, that class might, is what you want in your stories more than the story structure. And then after that is body language. And body language is the world's best way to get emotion into your story. So if you've ever been given feedback that basically says, I'm just not that into it, one of the big reasons that editors and agents don't get into a story is they don't feel the emotion of the story. So Helen was in the sexual tension class. And again, that's about layering in that tension, that wanting between two characters, wanting to act on the attraction, but not feeling that they can. And you can layer and layer and layer and have great sexual tension and never, ever have a sex scene. So too many writers think that writing strong sexual tension or writing romance period means that it's all about sex, and it's not. So that can make a huge difference in somebody's work. Okay. All right. So I look forward to your homework posting to the Facebook group. And I will get to that this evening and also tomorrow before we go to the next lecture. So we're kind of jumping ahead here, but work on your characters, go deeper into understanding what they're afraid of, because that's what you're going to be driving them toward. And if you're not writing a romance, the fear can be, I'm afraid of taking risks. I'm afraid of taking the responsibility. These are the kind of fears that we fear in our own lives. If you have a a story that someone has been abandoned, either emotionally or physically. That's a huge fear that can take forever to overcome in a person's life. And part of the reason to overcome it is that you don't want to open it up because it's too painful. So I hope that helps a little bit for people, and I will see you tomorrow and appreciate your being here. Take care, and I'll be in touch.